The meeting room aboard the massive space station felt cold and sterile. Commander Jake Sullivan sat at the far end of the curved table, watching 12 different alien species argue about the same thing they had been fighting over for months. The Zephyrian Empire was taking over star systems one by one, and nobody seemed to know how to stop them. Jake kept his mouth shut and listened. He had learned that speaking too early in these meetings only made the aliens more annoyed with him. The humans were still new to this galactic community, and most of the other species treated them like children who should be seen but not heard. Ambassador Veltar from the crystalline hegemony was speaking now. His voice sounded like glass breaking. Every time he talked, the Zephyrian war machine has destroyed another 3 colonies this week. Their ships are faster than ours, their weapons hit harder, and they seem to have no limit to how many soldiers they can throw at us. The other ambassadors nodded their various heads, tentacles, and other body parts. Jake had been coming to these meetings for 2 years now, but he still found it strange to see so many different kinds of life forms in one room. Some looked almost human, others were completely alien. The one thing they all had in common was that they thought humans were weak. "We need to hire more mercenaries," said Ambassador Crystal from the Void Dancers. She was tall and blue, with 4 arms that moved like water when she talked. "The Guild of Raxos has the best fighters in the galaxy. It cost a lot, but they get results." Jake cleared his throat. "With respect, Ambassador, maybe we should try a different approach." The room went quiet. All 24 alien eyes, plus a few other sensing organs, turned to look at him. Jake felt like a bug under a microscope, but he had dealt with worse things than angry aliens. "What do you suggest, Commander?" Veltar asked. His tone made it clear he was only asking to be polite. "Earth has a lot of experience with this kind of warfare. We could send military advisors to help plan the defense. Our people have fought wars like this before." The silence stretched for a few seconds. Then Ambassador Crystal started to laugh. It was a musical sound, like wind chimes, but Jake could tell she was not being friendly. "Commander Sullivan," she said, "your species still uses gunpowder weapons and metal bullets. You fight with explosives that would have been outdated 1,000 years ago on any civilized world. What could you possibly teach us about modern warfare?" Other ambassadors joined in the laughter, but he kept his voice calm. "Sometimes old methods work better than new ones. Sometimes simple is better than complex." Simple. Veltar's crystalline body flashed with bright colors which Jake had learned meant he was either amused or insulted. "Commander, your people have been in space for less than 200 years? We have been fighting wars among the stars for over 10,000 years. The Zephyrians have technology that makes your best weapons look like stone knives." Dr. Lisa Martinez, Earth's science representative, leaned forward. She was sitting next to Jake, and he could see she was getting angry too. "Ambassador, have you actually looked at our military history? Have you studied how humans fight wars?" "We have seen your files," said Ambassador Uralon from the Hive Mind Collective. His bug-like face clicked as he spoke. "Your species is very good at killing each other, but killing other humans is not the same as fighting a spacefaring empire. With advanced technology?" Lisa's face went red. "You have no idea what you're talking about." Dr. Martinez Veltar said, "Please do not take offense. We are not insulting your species. We are simply stating facts. Humans are brave. We will give you that. But bravery alone is not enough to win wars against an enemy like the Zephyrians." Jake stood up slowly. "What if I told you that humans have been preparing for this kind of war for thousands of years?" More laughter filled the room. Ambassador Crystal wiped tears from her large black eyes. "Commander, please. Your species only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. How could you have been preparing for space wars? Not space. Wars," Jake said. "Total wars. Wars where losing means your entire people die. Wars where you have to use everything you have, do everything you can, and sacrifice everything you care about just to survive." The laughter stopped. Jake had their attention now. "There's an old story that gets told in bars and meeting places. All across the galaxy," he continued. "Maybe you've heard it, about a race of warriors who turned their own planet into a training ground for war. A species that spent thousands of years learning how to kill, how to fight, how to win at any cost. Several ambassadors shifted uncomfortably. Jake could see that they knew the story he was talking about. The legend says this warrior race fought so many wars against each other that they became the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The story says they could turn anything into a weapon, that they never gave up, no matter how badly they were losing, and that they would rather die than surrender. Ambassador Veltar's colors had gone dim. That is just a myth, Commander. A cautionary tale about the dangers of too much aggression. Most scholars believe it was made up to teach young species about the importance of peace. What if it's not? A myth? Jake asked quietly. The room was dead silent now. Dr. Martinez stood up beside Jake. Ambassador Veltar, have you ever wondered why the warrior race in that legend sounds so much like humans? That is impossible, Urillan clicked.
Duh.
Legend is thousands of years old. Your species was still living in caves when that story first began. Was it? Lisa asked. Or were the first alien visitors to Earth so shocked by what they saw that they could only describe it as legend? Jake looked around the room. The story says the warrior race fought wars that killed millions of their own people, but they kept getting stronger. The legend talks about a species that invented thousands of different ways to kill. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to get better at it. He paused, letting that sink in. The myth says they turned their whole planet into a battlefield, with different regions fighting each other for thousands of years. It says they made war into a science, and science into war. Ambassador Crystal was not laughing anymore. Commander, what are you suggesting? Not suggesting anything, Jake said. I'm telling you that the warrior race from your legends is real. They're sitting right here in this room. And if you want to beat the Zephyrians, you're going to need to understand what that means. Dr. Martinez activated her datapad. Ambassadors, I'm sending you access codes to Earth's complete military database. Everything is there. Every war we've fought, every weapon we've built, every battle we've won and lost. Look at it. Really look at it. Then tell me again that humans don't know how to fight. The aliens stared at their data screens as the information started flowing in. Jake watched their faces change as they began to understand the scope of human warfare. The numbers were big, very big. This cannot be accurate, Veltar whispered. It says here that your species killed over 60 million of your own people. In a single war, World War II, Jake said simply. And that was just one war out of hundreds.
8.
But these casualties, Urillan clicked frantically. Your population should have been destroyed. How did your species survive? We didn't just survive, Lisa said grimly. We got stronger. Every war taught us something new. Every defeat made us more determined. Every victory made us more confident. Jake sat back down. Ambassadors. The Zephyrian Empire thinks they understand war. They fight like most civilized species fight, with honor, with rules, with limits. They try to win quickly and cleanly, with as few losses as possible. He leaned forward. Humans don't fight like that. We fight like our lives depend on it, because they always do. We fight like there are no rules, because in real war, there aren't any. We fight until we win, no matter how long it takes or how much it costs. The room stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, Ambassador Veltar spoke. Even if what you say is true, Commander, the Zephyrians have technology far beyond anything your species possesses. Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Ambassador, do you know what humans call a war where the enemy has better technology? More soldiers and more resources? Veltar shook his head.
We call it Tuesday.
3 months had passed since Jake Sullivan's warning about the warrior race, but the Galactic Council had not listened. They hired the expensive mercenaries from the Guild of Raxos instead. Now those mercenaries were dead, and for more star. Systems had fallen to the Zephyrian Empire. Ambassador Veltar stood at the head of the meeting table, his crystalline body flickering with dark colors that meant fear and desperation. The situation has become critical. The Raxos Guild lost 3 entire fleets trying to stop the Zephyrian advance. Survivors refused to take any more contracts against the Empire. Jake sat in the same chair he had occupied for months, but this time the other ambassadors were not laughing at him. They looked desperate, and desperate people were finally ready to listen. How many dead? Asked Ambassador Crystal. Her 4 blue arms were wrapped around herself like she was cold. Over 2 million mercenaries, Veltar replied. The Zephyrians destroyed their ship so completely that we could barely identify the wreckage. They are using some kind of new weapon that tears through shields like they were made of paper. Dr. Lisa Martinez opened her datapad. The Harmony Collective's homeworld was completely destroyed yesterday. 3 billion people dead in less than 6 hours. The Zephyrians did not even try to capture prisoners or take resources. They just killed everyone and moved on. The room fell silent. Even the aliens who had been most critical of humans looked shaken by the news. We need help, Urilin clicked quietly. Real help. Not more mercenaries who run away when things get difficult. All eyes turned to Jake. He had been waiting for this moment, but he took no pleasure in being right. Too many people had died while the council wasted time. Earth has someone who might be able to help, he said carefully. But I need to warn you, he's not what you would expect from a military advisor. At this point, Commander Sullivan, we are willing to consider any option, Veltar said. Who is this person? Colonel Danny Pierce. He's been fighting wars for longer than most of you have been alive. If anyone can figure out how to beat the Zephyrians, it's him. Ambassador Crystal leaned forward. What makes him so special? Thought about how to explain Danny Pierce to aliens who had never seen real war. He's what we call a soldier's soldier. It's a kind of man who other warriors respect because he survived things that should have killed him. Survived what exactly? Urilin asked. The Third Martian Uprising. The Asteroid Belt Wars. The Siege of Titan Station. 37 years of continuous combat across the solar system. He's fought in every major human conflict of the last 4 decades. Dr. Martinez added, Colonel Pierce has also studied every major battle in human history. He knows more about warfare than any person alive. Veltar's colors shifted to show interest. Very well, bring this Colonel Pierce to speak with us, but I must warn you, if he proves to be another disappointment like the Raxos mercenaries Earth, we'll bear responsibility for the consequences. 2 days later, Colonel Danny Pierce walked into the council chambers. Jake had warned the ambassadors that Pierce was not impressive to look at, but he could see they were still disappointed. Pierce was an older human, maybe 60 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. He walked with a slight limp from an old injury, and his face was marked with scars that told stories of battles fought and survived. He wore a simple military uniform with no fancy decorations, and his only weapon was an old combat knife on his belt. This is your great warrior, Ambassador? Crystal whispered to Jake. He looks like he should be retired. Pierce heard her, but he did not seem offended. He just smiled a little and took his seat at the table. Ambassadors, he said in a quiet voice, I understand you have a problem with the Zephyrian Empire. Colonel. Pierce Veltar began, we hope you can succeed where others have failed. The Guild of Raxos was considered the finest military force in the galaxy, yet they were completely destroyed. Pierce nodded. I read the reports on my way here. The mercenaries fought well, but they fought the wrong kind of war. What do you mean? Urilin asked. They tried to match the Zephyrian ship for ship, weapon for weapon. They played by the enemy's rules and fought the kind of battle the Zephyrians wanted to fight. Pierce leaned back in his chair. That's not how you win wars. Ambassador Crystal made a sound that might have been laughter. Colonel, with respect, you do not even carry an energy weapon. How do you expect to defeat an empire that has conquered half the galaxy? Pierce looked at her for a long moment.
Ambassador, may I ask you a question?
Of course. How many wars has your species fought? Crystal seemed confused by the question. The Void Dancers are a peaceful people. They've had perhaps 3 major conflicts in our entire history. And how long did those wars last? The longest was about 6 months. We prefer to settle disputes through diplomacy rather than violence. Pierce turned to Veltar. What about the crystalline hegemony? We have fought 7 wars over the past 1,000 years, Veltar replied. Most ended within a few weeks once casualties became too high to justify continuing. Pierce nodded and looked around the table. Anyone here fought a war that lasted more than a year? The ambassadors looked at each other, but no one answered. Humans have fought wars that lasted decades, Pierce said quietly. We've had conflicts that went on for generations where children grew up knowing nothing but battle. We've fought wars where entire civilizations were destroyed and rebuilt just to keep fighting. Dr. Amy Chen, who had arrived with Pierce, activated her data display. Ambassadors, I'd like to show you some examples from human military history. The screen filled with images of ancient battlefields, the 100 Years' War between England and France, the 30 Years' War in Central Europe, the Vietnam War, the war in Afghanistan. Pierce pointed to the screen. These were not quick, clean conflicts like the ones your species are used to. These were grinding, brutal wars where victory went to whoever could endure the most pain. But surely Urillin clicked. Such long conflicts would destroy any civilization. They made us stronger, Amy replied. Every long war taught us something new about strategy, tactics, and technology. We learned how to fight in every environment, against every kind of enemy. Pierce stood up and walked to the window that looked out into space. The Zephyrians are used to quick victories. They attack, destroy the enemy fleet, and move on to the next system. They've never fought an enemy that refused to give up. What are you suggesting? Veltar asked. Pierce turned back to the table. I'm suggesting that we give them a different kind of war. The kind of war humans have been fighting for thousands of years, which is what exactly Ambassador Crystal demanded? A war where losing battles doesn't mean losing the war, or where the enemy's advantages become weaknesses. A war where we fight not to win quickly, but to win completely. Right? Pierce returned to his seat. But first, I need to understand something about your cultures. When you fight wars, what are your objectives? To achieve our political goals with minimal casualties, Veltar said immediately. To preserve our way of life while forcing the enemy to negotiate, added Urillin. To restore peace as quickly as possible, said Crystal. Pierce nodded slowly. That's your problem right there. What do you mean? Veltar asked. When humans fight wars, we have one objective: to win. It's not to minimize casualties, not to preserve our way of life, not to restore peace quickly. To win, whatever that takes. Amy brought up another display. This is the city of London during World War II. The enemy was bombing it every night, killing thousands of civilians. But the humans living there refused to surrender. They kept working, kept fighting, kept believing they would win. The image changed to show a destroyed city. This is Berlin at the end of the same war. The humans who lived there fought until enemy soldiers were literally in their streets, in their buildings, in their homes. Even then, some kept fighting. Pierce pointed to the screen. That's what real war looks like. It's not clean battles between fleets in empty space, but total commitment to victory no matter what the cost. You're talking about fanaticism, Ambassador? Crystal said with obvious distaste. I'm talking about survival, Pierce replied. The Zephyrians are betting that you'll give up when the casualties get too high. When the war becomes too expensive, when victory seems impossible, they're counting on you to be reasonable. He leaned forward. But humans learned a long time ago that sometimes being reasonable means being dead. The room was quiet for several minutes. Finally, Veltar spoke. Colonel Pierce, what you're describing? Sounds like the legends of the warrior race that Commander Sullivan mentioned. Maybe it does, Pierce said. Maybe those legends were based on something real. He leaned forward. Humans don't fight like that. We fight like our lives depend on it, because they always do. We fight like there are no rules, because in real war, there aren't any. We fight until we win, no matter how long it takes or how much it costs. The room stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, Ambassador Veltar spoke. Even if what you say is true, Commander, the Zephyrians have technology far beyond anything your species possesses. Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Ambassador, do you know what humans call a war where the enemy has better technology? More soldiers and more resources? Veltar shook his head. We call it Tuesday. Colonel Danny Pierce had been studying the Zephyrian military files for 3 days without sleep. Jake Sullivan found him in the station's data center at 4 a.m, surrounded by holographic displays showing battle reports, fleet movements, and casualty statistics. Danny, you need to rest, Jake said quietly. Pierce looked up from the screens, his tired eyes still sharp and focused. Can't rest yet. I'm starting to see the pattern, but I need to be sure before I talk to the council. Again. What pattern? Pierce gestured to the displays around him. Look at these battle reports. Every Zephyrian victory follows the exact same sequence. They jump into a system, destroy the defending fleet in a single massive engagement, then move on to the next target. Clean, efficient, overwhelming force. Jake studied the data. That sounds like good military strategy to me. It's a good strategy if you're fighting civilized enemies who think like you do. Pierce stood up and stretched his back. But what happens when you run into an enemy that doesn't follow the rules? Before Jake could answer, Dr. Amy Chen entered the data center carrying 3 cups of coffee. I thought you might need this, she said, handing one to each man. Amy, show Jake the casualty analysis you've been working on, Pierce said. Amy activated another display. I've been looking at how different species handle losses in warfare. The results are fascinating and disturbing. The screen showed charts and graphs comparing various alien cultures. Most galactic species consider a conflict lost if they suffer more than 5% casualties. The crystalline hegemony actually has laws that require their military commanders to surrender if losses exceed 3%. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. 3%? It's nothing. Not to them, Amy replied. Their entire military philosophy is based on preserving life and minimizing suffering. They fight wars to achieve specific goals, then stop fighting once those goals become too expensive. Pierce pointed to another chart. Now look at human casualty rates in major conflicts. World War I, we lost over 15 million people and kept fighting. World War II, over 60 million dead, and we fought until the enemy surrendered unconditionally. The difference is staggering, Amy continued. During the Battle of Stalingrad alone, humans suffered more casualties than most alien species have lost in their entire military history. Jake shook his head. No wonder they think we're crazy. They don't understand that humans fight differently because we had to learn to fight differently, Pierce said. Earth was never a peaceful planet. We've been fighting wars for survival. Since before we had written language, Amy brought up images of ancient human battlefields. The siege of Troy lasted 10 years. The Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage went on for over a century. The Mongol invasions, the Crusades, the Napoleonic Wars. Humans have been perfecting the art of warfare for thousands of years. But it's more than just experience, Pierce added. It's about mindset. When aliens fight wars, they're trying to solve problems. When humans fight wars, we're trying to survive. The door to the data center opened, and Captain Rex Logan entered. He was Pierce's aide, a younger man with the same hard look in his eyes that came from too much combat. Colonel, the Council wants to see you in an hour. I've received reports. Of another Zephyrian attack? Pierce nodded. Which system? New Geneva. 300,000 colonists. The Zephyrians hit it 6 hours ago. Survivors. Rex's expression answered the question before he spoke. None, sir. Same pattern as always. Total destruction. No prisoners. No negotiations. Pierce was quiet for a moment. It settles it then. It's time to show the Council what they're really dealing with. An hour later, the Council chambers were filled with nervous alien representatives. The news from New Geneva had shaken them badly. Ambassador Veltar's crystalline body was flickering with dark, fearful colors. Colonel Pierce Veltar began. We hope you have some insight into how we can stop these attacks. The Zephyrians seem unstoppable. Pierce stood up and activated the main display. Ambassadors, I need to show you something that might be difficult to understand, but it's the key to defeating the Zephyrian Empire. The screen filled with numbers, statistics from human military history. These are casualty reports from Earth's major conflicts over the past 500 years. I want you to look at them. Carefully, Ambassador Crixtel studied the display. Colonel, these numbers cannot be correct, according to this data. Your species killed over 200 million of your own people in warfare during just the 20th and 21st centuries. The numbers are correct, Pierce replied calmly. But that's impossible. Urillin clicked frantically. No species could survive losses like that. Not only did we survive, Amy Chen said. Stepping forward, our population continued to grow. During the same period when we were fighting these wars, human population increased from 1 billion to over 8 billion. The alien representatives looked at each other in confusion and horror. How is that possible? Veltar asked. Because humans don't fight wars the way you do, Pierce explained. You fight until the cost becomes too high, then you negotiate. We fight until we win, no matter what the cost. Pierce changed the display to show images of human soldiers in various conflicts. This is a human soldier in World War II. He's fighting in a city that's been bombed to rubble. His unit has taken 70% casualties. By your standards. This battle was lost weeks ago. The image changed to show the same soldier still fighting, but he's still there, still fighting. 'Cause giving up means his people die, his family dies, his entire way of life disappears. This is madness, Ambassador Crixtal whispered. This is survival, Rex Logan said firmly. I fought in the Ceres Rebellion. We were outnumbered 10-1, outgunned, cut off from supplies. By any reasonable measure, we should have surrendered on the first day. But you didn't, Pierce continued. You fought for 3 years in asteroid tunnels, using improvised weapons, eating recycled food, breathing recycled air. You fought until you won. Amy brought up another display. This is what the Zephyrian Empire doesn't understand about humans. They think war is about superior technology and overwhelming force. But humans learned long ago that wars are won by whoever wants victory more. The display showed human resistance movements throughout history. The French resistance in World War II, the Viet Cong in Vietnam, the Afghan Mujahideen fighting the Soviet Union. In every case, a technologically inferior force defeated a modern military through sheer determination. Pierce walked closer to the alien representatives. The Zephyrians have been winning because they're fighting civilized enemies who follow civilized rules. They attack. You resist for a while, casualties mount, and you surrender to save lives. That's the rational response, Veltar protested. Rational for you? Maybe? But humans gave up being rational about warfare a long time ago. Pierce activated a recording of human soldiers in combat. The aliens watched in horrified fascination as wounded humans continued fighting, as soldiers with mortal injuries kept advancing, as entire units fought to the last man rather than surrender. This is what the warrior race legends were really describing, Pierce said quietly. A species that refuses to lose, even when losing makes sense. A species that treats death as acceptable, but defeat as unthinkable. Lieutenant Kelly Brooks, Pierce's tactical analyst, entered the chamber carrying a datapad. Colonel, I've finished analyzing the Zephyrian command structure. Show them, Kelly. Kelly activated her display. The Zephyrian military is based on absolute hierarchy and rigid obedience. Every decision flows down from the top. Every strategy follows predetermined patterns. So, Urillin asked. So their entire system depends on their enemies being predictable, Kelly explained. They win battles by using superior force against opponents who fight according to established military doctrine. Pierce smiled grimly. But humans don't follow established military doctrine. We break rules, we adapt, we improvise. We fight dirty when we have to, and we always have to. Amy brought up the final display. Ambassadors, I've been comparing the legendary warrior race from your folklore with actual human military history. The similarities are not coincidental. The screen showed ancient galactic texts alongside human historical records. The legends describe a species that made war into science and science into war. Look at human technological development. Most of our greatest innovations came from military research. The legends talk about a race that turned their homeworld into a training ground for conflict. Earth has had continuous warfare somewhere on the planet for the entire span of recorded history. The myths describe warriors who never surrendered, never retreated, never accepted defeat. This is literally the motto of several human military units. Pierce looked around the room at the stunned alien faces. Ambassadors, you've been dismissing the warrior race as mythology for thousands of years. But we never went away. We just hadn't found you yet. Veltar's colors had gone completely dim. Colonel Pierce, what you're describing is not warfare. It's systematic insanity. Maybe it is, Pierce agreed. But it's our insanity, and it's kept. Us alive when being sane would have gotten us killed. Even if what you say is true, Ambassador Crystal said shakily, how does this help us defeat the Zephyrians? The war room aboard the council station had been transformed. Gone were the polished conference tables and comfortable chairs. In their place, Colonel Pierce had installed tactical displays, communication equipment, and planning boards covered. With maps of Zephyrian-controlled space, Ambassador Veltar stood before the largest display, his crystalline body flickering with nervous energy. Colonel Pierce, you have had a week to study our situation. What do you propose? Pierce looked up from a datapad covered with notes written in his own handwriting. The alien representatives had learned not to interrupt him when he was thinking. His planning sessions often went on for hours without a word spoken. Ambassadors, I'm going to outline a strategy that will defeat the Zephyrian Empire. But I need to warn you, everything I'm about to suggest will violate your concepts of civilized warfare. Major Tony Garcia stepped forward. He was Pierce's specialist in what humans called asymmetric warfare, the art of fighting enemies who were stronger than you. The first thing you need to understand is that we're not going to fight the Zephyrians the way they expect to be fought. What do you mean? Asked Ambassador Crystal. Pierce activated the main display, showing a detailed map of Zephyrian territory. The enemy controls 47 star systems. Their military doctrine is built around defending these systems with massive fleets and orbital fortifications, so we attack their weakest positions, your island suggested. No, Pierce said flatly. We don't attack their positions at all. The alien representatives looked confused. Dr. Nicole Adams, Pierce's xenopsychologist, stepped up to explain, I've been studying Zephyrian psychology and culture. Their entire society is based on order, hierarchy, and control. They cannot function in chaos. We're going to give them chaos, Major Garcia added with a grin that made several ambassadors. Uncomfortable, Pierce changed the display to show shipping routes between Zephyrian systems. This empire depends on supply lines that stretch across hundreds of light years. Food, fuel, weapons, replacement parts, all moving on predictable schedules between predictable destinations. You want to attack their supply ships? Veltar asked. More than that, Pierce replied. We're going to teach their conquered populations how to fight back. The room went silent. Ambassador Crystal was the first to speak. Colonel, that's impossible. The Zephyrians have crushed every resistance movement they've encountered. They've crushed alien resistance movements, Garcia corrected. Movements that followed alien ideas about warfare. We're going to teach them human ideas about resistance. Pierce brought up historical records from Earth. The French resistance during World War II, the Viet Cong in Vietnam, the Afghan fighters who defeated the Soviet Union. In every case, an occupied population defeated a technologically superior military force. How? Urilin asked. Lieutenant Kelly Brooks activated her tactical computer by making the cost of occupation higher than the value of the territory the Zephyrians keep. Control through fear and overwhelming force. But what happens when their own people start dying? Pierce nodded. Kelly has identified the key weakness in Zephyrian strategy. They rule through terror, but they've never faced an enemy that could bring terror back to them. Dr. Adams brought up psychological profiles of Zephyrian leadership. Their command structure is rigid and centralized. Every major decision flows through a small group of military leaders. If we can disrupt that leadership, you're talking about assassination, Ambassador Veltar said, his colors flashing with alarm. I'm talking about war, Pierce replied calmly. Real war, not the polite conflicts you're used to. Major Garcia stepped forward. Ambassadors, let me explain something about human military doctrine. When we fight wars, there are no non-combatants in the enemy leadership. Politicians, generals, administrators, anyone who supports the war effort becomes a target. That's barbaric, Crystal protested. That's effective, Pierce said. The Zephyrians have been winning because they know their enemies will follow rules of engagement that protects certain people and certain targets. We don't follow those rules. Pierce changed the display to show a detailed plan of attack. Phase 1. We insert human advisors into the conquered systems. Not to lead resistance movements, but to teach local populations how to fight.
Ow.
What can? Humans teach them that they don't already know, Urilan asked. Captain Rex Logan answered. How to make weapons from farming equipment. How to turn household chemicals into explosives. How to fight from hiding and disappear back into the population. How to make the enemy afraid to leave their bases, Garcia added. How to turn every street corner into a potential ambush, every building into a fortress. Pierce continued. It's Phase 2. We target Zephyrian leadership using methods they've never encountered. Not massive fleet battles or siege warfare, but precise strikes designed to create confusion and fear. Phase 3, Kelly said. We exploit the chaos to turn their military against itself. The Zephyrian Empire is held together by fear and rigid control. Once that control breaks down, their own forces will start fighting each other. Dr. Adams brought up more psychological data. The Zephyrian society cannot handle uncertainty. Their entire culture is built on knowing exactly where everyone fits in the hierarchy. When that hierarchy starts collapsing, they panic. Ambassador Veltar studied the plan with growing alarm. Colonel Pierce, what you're describing is not warfare. It's systematic destruction of an entire civilization. Yes, Pierce agreed. That's what total war means. You don't fight to achieve limited objectives or to force negotiations. You fight to completely destroy the enemy's ability to threaten you ever again. But the casualties, Crixta whispered. Billions of Zephyrians could die. Billions of innocent people have already died, Rex pointed out. The Harmony Collective, New Geneva, the Outer Rim colonies. The Zephyrians don't take prisoners, they don't negotiate, they don't show mercy. Pierce looked around the room at the shocked alien faces. Ambassadors, you wanted to know how to defeat an enemy that seems unstoppable? This is how. But you need to understand what you're asking for. Major Garcia activated a final display showing human military volunteers. We have 3,000 human soldiers ready to volunteer for this mission. They understand they probably won't come home. They understand they'll be fighting a war with no rules, no quarter given or expected. Why would they volunteer for such a mission? Urilan asked. Because that's what humans do, Pierce replied simply. When our people are threatened, when our way of life is in danger, we fight. Not for glory, not for conquest, but for survival. Dr. Adams stepped forward. There's something else you need to understand about this plan. Once we start this kind of war, it doesn't stop until one side is completely defeated. There's no negotiating, no ceasefire, no honorable surrender. The Zephyrians will fight too. The death rather than accept defeat, Pierce added. And so will we. That's what makes this strategy so dangerous. Lieutenant Kelly brought up casualty projections that made the alien representatives step back in horror. Conservative estimates suggest we'll lose 60% of our human volunteers in the first year. The Zephyrian military will suffer even higher losses. Then the civilian populations caught in between will suffer worst of all, Major Garcia said grimly. This isn't a clean war fought between military forces. This is total warfare where everyone becomes a target. Pierce deactivated the displays and looked directly at each ambassador. This is what you get when you ask the warrior race to fight for you. We don't do limited engagements or surgical strikes. We do complete victory or total destruction.
There
has to be another way, Ambassador Veltar pleaded. There is, Pierce agreed. You can surrender to the Zephyrians and hope they show more mercy than they've shown anyone else. You can keep trying diplomatic solutions while they destroy more worlds. You can hire more mercenaries and watch them fail. He paused. Or you can let humans teach the galaxy what real war looks like. The room was silent for long minutes. Finally, Ambassador Crixtal spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. If we agree to this plan, will it work? Pierce's smile was cold and certain. Ambassador, humans have been perfecting this kind of warfare for thousands of years. The Zephyrians have never faced an enemy like us. But will it work? She insisted. Yes, Pierce said simply. But when it's over, the galaxy will never be the same. Once you've seen what humans can do when we stop holding back, you can never unsee it. The alien representatives looked at each other, weighing the choice between certain defeat and uncertain victory purchased with unimaginable brutality. The warrior race was offering to save them. The question was whether they were brave enough to accept the price. The council voted to approve Pierce's plan with heavy hearts. 3 days later, the first human volunteers were already on their way to Zephyrian-controlled space. Colonel Pierce stood in the command center watching the transport ships disappear into hyperspace, carrying soldiers who knew they might never return home. "Second thoughts, Danny?" Jake Sullivan asked quietly. Pierce shook his head. "No second thoughts. Just hoping we're not too late." The first reports came back within a week. Staff Sergeant Chris Murphy was leading a team of human advisors on the conquered world of Kepler Prime. His message was brief, but encouraging. Local population eager to learn, beginning weapons training tomorrow. And sometimes the way forward is into someone. Is into someone else's. Is into someone. Into Official report was that the aliens on Kepler Prime had been shocked by human methods. The humans taught them to make explosives, from cleaning supplies to turn farming tools into deadly weapons, and to use the planet's own infrastructure against their occupiers. "You want us to attack the water treatment plant?" asked Zira, a local leader whose people had been enslaved for 2 years. Murphy nodded. "Not to destroy it, but to contaminate it just enough to make the Zephyrian garrison sick. When they come to investigate, we hit them while they're weak. But our own people use that water too," Zira protested. "Your people know it's contaminated, so they can avoid it. The Zephyrians don't." Murphy's expression was grim but determined. War isn't about fighting fair, it's about winning. Within a month, Kepler Prime had become a nightmare for its Zephyrian occupiers. Supply convoys were attacked by fighters, who seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. Communications equipment failed mysteriously. Food shipments were poisoned. Guards disappeared from their posts without a trace. Captain Ben Foster was working on a different kind of mission in the Tau Ceti system. His job was to teach captured populations how to turn their entire worlds into resistance networks. "Every person in your city is now a potential spy," he explained to a gathering of alien refugees. "The Zephyrians can't watch everyone all the time. You become their eyes and ears, then you feed that information to the fighters." An elderly alien named Corv raised his hand. "But Captain Foster, if we're caught helping the resistance, the Zephyrians will kill us all." Foster's voice was gentle but firm. "Corvée, they're already killing you all. They destroyed your government, enslaved your people, and turned your world into a factory for their war machine. The only question is whether you die fighting or die on your knees." The resistance network spread faster than anyone had expected. The Zephyrians, used to ruling through fear, found themselves afraid for the first time in their empire's history. Their soldiers stopped patrolling alone. Their commanders moved constantly, never sleeping in the same place twice. On the council station, Pierce watched the reports coming in with satisfaction. The first phase of his plan was working perfectly. "Zephyrian military communications are showing signs of stress," Lieutenant Kelly Brooks reported. "Their commanders are requesting more troops for garrison duty on worlds they thought were completely pacified." Major Garcia grinned. "And those extra troops have to come from somewhere. Every soldier guarding a conquered world is a soldier who can't be fighting on the front lines." But Pierce knew the real test was yet to come. The Zephyrians were adapting to the guerrilla warfare, bringing in more brutal methods to control their populations. It was time for Phase 2, the assassination of General Vexstar. The Zephyrian military commander took place during what should have been a secure strategy meeting on their fortress world of Proxima Base. Human infiltrators had spent weeks studying the base's security, learning guard rotations, mapping ventilation systems, identifying weaknesses. When the bomb exploded in the command center, it didn't just kill the general, it destroyed the central computer core that coordinated Zephyrian fleet movements across 6 star systems. The news reached the council station 12 hours later. Ambassador Veltar's crystalline body was flickering with colors Pierce had never seen before. Colonel, the Zephyrians are claiming that General Vexstar was killed by terrorists using a chemical weapon of mass destruction. Pierce looked up from his tactical displays. Chemical weapon? They say it was some kind of gas that dissolved his entire body, Veltar continued. Is this true? Dr. Amy Chen answered instead. It wasn't a chemical weapon. It was a fragmentation grenade filled with a cleaning acid that humans have been using for centuries. Very effective in enclosed spaces. The alien representatives stared at her in horror. Oh. Pierce continued studying his reports as if they were discussing the weather. The important thing, he said calmly, is that Zephyrian command structure is starting to collapse. Look at these intercepts. The main display showed decoded Zephyrian military messages. The language was increasingly frantic as commanders demanded reinforcements, reported equipment failures, and complained about unreliable intelligence. They're fighting shadows, Major Garcia observed. They can't figure out who the enemy is because everyone is the enemy. Phase 3 began when the Zephyrian Empire started turning on itself. Regional commanders, isolated by communication breakdowns and terrified of assassination, began making independent decisions that contradicted orders from the central government. The civil war that Pierce had predicted started with a simple misunderstanding. Admiral Krestock, commanding the 4th Fleet, received orders to withdraw from the Vega system to reinforce defenses around the capital. But the message had been intercepted and altered by human agents. Instead of withdrawal orders, Krestock received instructions to attack the 3rd Fleet, which was supposedly under the control of traitors. The resulting battle destroyed both fleets, and convinced other Zephyrian commanders that the Empire was falling apart from within. It's working exactly like you said it would, Captain Rex Logan reported to Pierce. The Zephyrians are so paranoid now that they're seeing enemies everywhere, even among their own forces. Pierce nodded grimly. The problem with ruling through fear is that eventually the fear turns inward. The final battle came sooner than anyone expected. The Zephyrian Emperor, desperate to regain control of his crumbling empire, ordered a massive attack on Earth itself. If he could destroy the source of the resistance tactics, he believed he could restore order to his forces. But the Emperor had made a crucial mistake. He was bringing his fleet to fight humans on humanity's home ground. When the Zephyrian Armada arrived in the Sol system, they found Earth's defenses ready for them. Not just human ships, but alien vessels from every species in the Galactic Council, all using tactics learned from human military advisors. Pierce commanded the defense from aboard the human flagship Terra's Pride as the enemy fleet approached. He opened a communication channel to all ships in the combined fleet. All ships, this is Colonel Pierce. You've learned to fight like humans over the past months. Now it's time to show the galaxy what that means. The battle was brutal beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships rammed each other when their weapons failed. Crews continued fighting even when their vessels were crippled and burning. Damaged ships deliberately crashed into enemy targets rather than retreat. The Zephyrian Emperor watched his supposedly superior fleet being torn apart by enemies who refused to follow any civilized rules of engagement. When his own flagship was boarded by human Marines who fought with knives when their guns ran out of ammunition, he finally understood what his empire had awakened. Staff Sergeant Chris Murphy was among the Marines who reached the Emperor's command deck. The alien ruler, faced with humans who showed no fear of death and no interest in taking prisoners, made a choice that would have been unthinkable months earlier. He surrendered. The war ended not with a great space battle or a negotiated peace, but with the complete collapse of Zephyrian military resistance. Their surviving commanders, scattered across dozens of star systems, laid down their weapons rather than face more human warfare. 6 months later, Pierce returned to the Council. Stationed for the final time, The alien representatives who had once dismissed humans as primitive now looked at him with a mixture of respect and fear. Colonel Pierce, Ambassador Veltar said carefully, "The Galactic Council owes humanity a great debt. Your strategy saved us all." Pierce nodded. "The threat is over. The Zephyrian Empire is broken, and it won't be reforming anytime soon." "What will happen to the human soldiers who volunteered for this mission?" Ambassador Crixtel asked. "The ones who survived will come home," Pierce replied. "They'll go back to their families, their jobs, their normal lives. Most of them will never talk about what they did here. And the galaxy has learned something new about humanity," Dr. Lisa Martinez added. "You now know that the warrior race from your legends was never extinct. We were just waiting for someone who needed us." Air stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Ambassadors, I hope you never need our help again. But if you do, remember what you learned here. When humans fight wars, we fight to win. Nothing else matters." As Pierce walked away, the alien representatives sat in silence. They had saved their civilization, but they had also learned a truth that would haunt them forever.